It's real.
So, it was interesting. I was sitting over the past couple of days, like trying to figure out, like, all right, what's the intention here, right? Like, we're coming together, we're having this conversation, and it's such a big topic, right? It's something that's so historically ingrained in us to like suppress things, push things away, not take care of ourselves. And, for me, it was like, how do we just start chipping away, right? We might not even see all this major change in our lifetime, but how do we play our part, right, in this? And so for me, it was like, I'm really excited for us to come together and just start talking, right? Because we're used to not, right? And we get put in front of us constantly these statistics, and I was looking at some of them, and it was like, between the CDC and Mental Health America, they're talking about 79% of all suicides are males. I just saw something about soldiers, and they were like, since 2006, there's an 86% increase in male suicides between the age of 25 and 34 or something like that. And then they talk about how men are way more or less likely to seek help and stuff like that. And 6 million men a year deal with depression. And it's like, there's a crisis going on, right? And so I'm excited for us to just come and talk, like just to share our hearts and to just share kind of our stories. And so before we even dive in, I want to honor each of you because it takes a lot to come and see yourself and allow others to see you. And so I already have so much, I admire each of you for showing up in this because it's different for us. And I'm excited to chip away at that. So the first question I always love to start with like an open kind of just reflective question. And so this first one, I'm curious to know, what's something recently that you're proud of that is a result of something you've worked on where historically you've maybe done something differently? I'll start as just an example. I'm used to letting others lead the way, and I'm used to going off of other people's word, where a lot of the times that stems from me in I have a feeling or I have an emotion and I'll just put it to the side. And I've done a lot of work to make sure that when I'm feeling those things, I'm allowed to have my voice be heard. And so that's shown up in my career, that's shown up in asking for what I want in relationships, but recently I've been really proud that I've honored the feeling inside and haven't been like, let's just push it back like I have historically. So that's something for me that I'm really proud of recently.
I would say for me, it's a shift in mindset and environment. I think my biggest initial struggle was being the one that would refuse to ask for help. Like I was always showing up for everybody else around me. But as a byproduct, my own internal environment was chaotic, and I had never like truly addressed it because I was always making sure I was helping, making sure I was assisting. And it got really daunting. And I actually had experienced a lot of kind of mental health stuff early with my father, because my father went through a really difficult period where he had to get institutionalized. So, taken to a psych ward type stuff where like there was so much pressure. And so in my head, I'd always attributed that to like a weakness growing up, because I'm like, oh no, I don't want to get that bad, right? And as a byproduct, I would just, like you talked about, just kind of repress, not speak up. And my internal environment was just extremely dark. Like externally, I was there, I was showing up. And it wasn't until I started therapy about a year ago where that was the one thing that my therapist spoke to me about, is really working on that internal environment and being proud of the person that I look at in the mirror, right? As opposed to someone who always thinks I have to be doing better or I have to be, and that was just the natural competitive energy in me, but it was really tearing me up for a while. And I think I finally gotten to a point where like I can give myself grace and really move in that and move in that love more freely, right? So just both my internal environment and also as a byproduct, it's affected my external environment. I think the relationships that I have now are so much more meaningful and fruitful. But it started with making that shift and continuing to do that work, so.
I think early on I did a really good job at doing what other people wanted me to do. Like we spoke briefly earlier just about going to college and doing all the right things, making good grades, and all of that I realized was for my parents. And to fit in, I think, right? Society says, go to school, go to college, you'll succeed and all these things, and all your friends are doing it, and right? After a while, you get to a place where you're just like, but why? And once I asked myself why, I had to remember when I was a kid, I didn't actually like doing what everybody else was doing, right? So, and it's funny as an adult when you just start doing it, you don't ask yourself, why the heck am I doing this? I think the best thing that I did was challenge myself and say, Chris, are you happy with what you're doing, with the path that you're on? And once I was able to answer that question, the difficult thing to do was take action. I know it's not easy, so, but I wouldn't trade it. Like you have to look yourself in the mirror. We talked about that earlier, right? Like just take action. I think that's I give myself a lot of grace and I applaud myself for the path I'm on.
I would say historically, I took the path of least resistance. And once I made this change, once I started to actively seek resistance, like just immense levels of growth have been manifested. I mean, it's been amazing. Whereas, it's from the little things to the big things. It's like, as soon as I catch it where I need to clean my room and I feel a little bit of that pull that, maybe I can go do something else. Mm-hmm. It's like, wait, there's resistance there, which means there's growth there. Let me go ahead and hop on that. So I think, it's still, you're always going to kind of be in these patterns a little bit, you just try to get better and better at it, keep constantly raising that standard. But yeah, man, that's what I'm most proud of recently is just like, okay, I actively seek resistance now. And I know that is, in direct connection to my growth. So.
Yeah. For me, definitely one of the things I would say I'm most proud of is like taking that power back. I was for so long trying to fit into this box around what other people thought success meant to them. And so for me, just recently when I left my full-time job, it was something that I had mentally thought about and talked about and chatted about for over a year. And it was like eating me inside to be somewhere and not allowing to trust myself because maybe I didn't feel enough to be able to make whatever I thought or wanted to happen. And so, about a month, it was early October is when I finally had this, kind of thing that came up and it was like, why are you always taking a chance for everybody else? Why don't you take a chance on yourself? Do you not trust yourself? And it was almost like this challenge. It was like, okay, you're a competitor. You gonna like compete for yourself or are you gonna just, bow down and let everybody else tell you what to do and seek in their power? And so it was like, I was super proud to be able to stand up and be like, all right, I'll never know what it's like if I don't just take that action. And I had to very much lean into that resistance that most other people I feel and that I see with my friends and family are like, what in the world are you doing? And to me, I'm like, just wait. And so it's been unique. And so it's pretty powerful for me to be able to step into that.
Thanks for sharing. I love how even just in our shares, it was like, this is who I kind of was before. This is where the pivot happened and kind of here's where I find myself now. And in all of that, there was this, I hear like there was this settling. There was this like, let me just put myself in this box. But there was something that drove us in our individual journeys to be like, I gotta do this, or I gotta go here, or I gotta do that. I'm curious for you guys, what was it for you that got you to actually be like, I am gonna take the action, I am gonna do the inner work, I am gonna lean towards resistance, I am gonna honor like the story I have, what were you experiencing where it was like, I gotta do this? Because a lot of times, right, we can compromise, we can justify with ourselves, be like, oh, you don't need to worry about it now, you don't need to do it now. Like, we can push it off. But in our stories, like, we've all done it. So what was it? That's what I'm curious to know.
Fear. Like, I think fear was, it's like fear of fear, right? Like, my biggest motivator was, can I be all that I can be? And if I'm not, how can I continue to push that envelope forward, right? And I think it goes back to knowing, like a deep knowing of who you are and doing that work. And I had attached so much of my journey to what I was able to do, rather it's like, who am I, right? Like, who do I exist as, right? Like, yes, I'm an artist, illustrator, designer, creator, like all the titles, and we all have titles and
Sure.
labels, right? But like, when you get to the root of who you genuinely are and how you want to cultivate that and express that in the world, I just had to be very honest, bro. Like, I always go back to, I'm just a storyteller. Like, I love telling stories, like enriching stories, right? And so whether it was film, whether it was art, whatever that was, I was always looking for ways to find a way to express myself through that medium. And for me, I feel like my biggest or greatest gift to the world is to be able to tell meaningful stories. And as a byproduct, also tell my own. But when I was quote unquote settling, like you talked about, or knew I could push further, but didn't have, maybe the guidance early on, but I had that innate feeling in my kind of psyche that I'm like, I can go further than this. That fear of like, well, not being all that I could be and fully expressing myself, that actually pushed me to move forward and not settle, So I think I feel like we don't really talk enough about fear either, right? And how
Sure.
it can motivate us, but also as a byproduct, we also have to look to remaining in love, I think is the most important thing too, right? Like the love that you have for the things that you do or who you are, that is what it kind of went back to. So fear was the catalyst of like, oh, I need to get out and I need to do these things and I don't want to be boxed in, like I'm afraid of being siloed. So that fear was the catalyst, but that fear slowly turned into love and it had to go back to the self-love first. So that's really what it came down to.
This guy's over here dancing with fear. I love it.
Shadow work, I mean, like we talked about doing the shadow work, and I just now started tapping into that too, and like what that means, right? Like when we go to our darkest kind of places, what is on the other side of that though, I think is the really beautiful thing that we want to hold on to. So yeah.
I'm getting chills from you saying that.
Yeah, just listening to you, as soon as you said that, I was like, bro, 100% for me. I'm curious to hear everybody else's response, but for me, my biggest fear was not being good enough, right? And I used to write that down, hoping that something would come out of it, right? I didn't know. I was just, so I pursued things where I knew I was good. I knew I could excel. Oddly enough, I wasn't the greatest at soccer. I'd worked my tail off, so I'm not really sure why I chose that one. But for me, I think you said going back to self-love, and that's what it was for me. Once I was able to make the mental switch from, okay, your biggest fear is not being good enough, asking myself why, right? Like what is the worst thing that'll happen if you're not good enough in this specific area, right? And I think the best thing for me was through therapy, again, beginning to uncover areas of my life where I wasn't my best self because of things that were just out of my control at that time. And so because of those things, I still would beat myself up and didn't realize I was doing that. And so it took time for me to see certain things and be like, wait, Chris, you're actually doing much better than you think. You started this whole personal development journey. Nobody told you to start that in 2017, right? And then you're moving along and you realize, okay, well, for me, life kind of, if you're moving the wrong way, powers that be are going to move out of the way, right? If you're moving the right way and you're actually pursuing the best version of yourself, there's going to be tension, going back to what you were saying, and breaking, where you have to tear that muscle. You have to become a new self, going back into the cocoon where it's dark and it's cold and you're like, this sucks. Why am I here? And going back and remembering the why. And once you remember who you are, writing those things down, affirmations, all those things, I'm a huge believer in that. I've been doing it since I was a kid. Didn't realize I was actually, that's what it was. I was just trying to, spark something in there. And once I was able to look at, there was one area in my life, and I can share this, with my son and my son's mother, that didn't match anything else in my life. Everything else was moving forward. Everything else was good. That specific area was not, and still isn't. And I think I allowed that to hinder who I really was and block what I could have become. If I would have stayed on that, I don't know if I would have quit my job. I think I would have just stayed the corporate route, stayed scared, continued doing whatever the heck, just because I was trying to please people that didn't necessarily matter anyway, right? Like the first person that you got to look after your star player. I'm the star player, right? And in order for me to take care of other people, I have to take care of myself first, meaning I had to protect myself and remove myself from toxic situations, which is another conversation. But yeah, that's a long answer for.
No, I love it though.
And I think this is where the power lies, right? How many of you have already started to see yourself in each other's shares, right?
Sure.
Like, I think so much of it is that isolation piece for us as men. And it's like, well, I can't say that because, man, all my boys, all the other guys, they love themselves. Like, I can't say I don't love myself. Like, they're gonna look at me like, what? You're crazy. And it's like, we're all dealing with it, right? Or the fear, or whatever it is. So, I appreciate those shares and I appreciate the openness because this is where the power is. The power is in like, fuck, I got you. And I got you because I see you because I am you, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's powerful.
Just to encourage, because I also feel like we don't encourage each other enough as men, right? And like uplift each other.
Yeah.
We do it with our ladies, with the people that we care about, right? But it's like genuinely, when we're in the fire. And I want to just encourage you, Brandon, because you said that historically you would take the path of least resistance. And since I've met you, I feel like you've always encountered the resistance head on. And that's something I've always commended you and admired about you. So I really appreciate you sharing that earlier, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was trying to think while you were speaking, I'm like, yeah, what was that moment? And I'm just like, I don't think it was a moment. I think that, and I'm sure this is going to be that tension with mental health as well, right? This thing where you want to grow, you want to be better, you want to develop the self. And so you start to figure out all avenues in your life in which you can, develop yourself, start cultivating. And so I feel like it just kind of comes with, like, you just look at every area and you're like, all right, cool, where can I be better at? And so that, that resistance thing came in from like, yo, okay, if I feel resistance in something, I know it means that there's some growth in there. That means I can be better, right? So it is sort of this just wanting to be better and wanting to grow. But of course, there's a fine line between that, toxic growth and, growth that is beneficial and productive for the self. So, it's tough because I didn't really can capture any moments where it's like, oh, that was it. It was just, you just want to get better. You know what I mean? And I think a healthy way to do that is I guess I gotta just speak personally. For me, it is about, yo, I want to do this for my family. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like it's not a weight for me anymore. You know what I mean? Whereas it might have been in the past. It's like, it's not a weight for me anymore. It's like, I want to do this. I want to be a provider. I want to be the rock in my family. Mm-hmm. I want to show strength. I want to show will. I want to do this thing for them. And now it's a motivator. Whereas, I think even sometimes in our first shedding or awakening or shedding of whatever those narratives are, it's like first that's when it's like, do I really want to do this? Like, who do I really want to be? And then that's when all of it can kind of feel like a weight. Mm-hmm. Then once you figure out what it is and you're like, no, I want to be here for my family. I want to be here for my my wife, my daughter, my mom, my sister. Like, then it just becomes like, oh yeah, okay, this is light work. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So
I want to acknowledge that as well. I think a lot of people too put a lot of pressure and stress on themselves because they find themselves in situations like this or wanting to grow, and they can't necessarily attribute it to like one moment, right? It's like, I think, and this is me too, like, I've realized, like, I have a lot of emotional trauma, but it wasn't anything, it wasn't like an event. It wasn't like this happened and I was like, for me, it was like so many just little things through society and just how people interacted with me. And I love that you named that though, because I think a lot of people struggle because they're like, what's wrong? Like, nothing happened. And we've convinced ourselves that something big had to happen. And I saw it like, and I just think it's powerful that you shared that, because you can be wanting to take care of your mental health. You could be proactive in wanting to grow, and like, it doesn't have to be this dramatic thing, right? We're all humans. We all have interactions. We all have experiences. And so it's just like what we're carrying within us that's like, all right, now I want to do something with this. Mm-hmm. Or this is showing up for me. Like, let me lean there. I really wanted to acknowledge that because I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of it too is that just in Western society, like, we're shown so much of the hero's journey. We try to develop these, like, our stories, and we're always selling our story, right? In a job, and we're selling our resume. When we sell our businesses, when we make brands, like, it has to have some climatic, like, oh, and I was this way and I fell and then I got back up and then I saw it and then, and it's like, right, and I made it through. Smoke comes up. It's just like, my room was dirty, I cleaned it, and an epiphany happened. You know what I mean? It's like, I think that's a big part of it. Just like, man, it's like, it has to be some type of dramatic story. Well, it's like, yo, let this moment be the story, and then that moment after, and then that moment after, like, just, it doesn't stop thinking so hard about where it came from or where it didn't come from and all that. Like, we talked about this, and I hope, don't want to take too much time, but it was like, man, psychology will tell you this, biology will tell you this, your therapist will tell you this, friends will tell you this, family will tell you this, like, everything will tell you this, but what will you tell you? It's like, man, you can think about all these different things of how your life became, or you can just really earnestly just continue to instill the choices, the thoughts, the feelings, the experiences that you want to be now. You know what I mean? And let that carry your life. Mm-hmm. So.
I like that.
for me, it was having we talked about it, right? I had nothing specific, but it all kind of manifested, and it manifested over time. And I think I had a variety of moments, quote unquote, but one stuck out in particular. I was actually showering, getting ready to go to work one morning, and I just remember, and stay with me as I try to describe it, because I just remember almost seeing like black and white. Like just everything like around me was like black. It was all dull, right? And I noticed that it was the same feeling going to work. Like it was just this automatic, and I don't know what it was like in me that had a moment of like, this is what life was like cracked up to be. Like people were like, yo, wait until you're an adult, and wait until you do this, and wait until you do that. And I hit the boxes, and I was telling you guys before, like I hit the degrees. I was in grad school, like bro, like the second I was able to be in grad school, my ass was in grad school, right? And then I was an assistant principal, like so young. I was like 20 years younger than everyone else, and like you look and it's like, yo, look at this guy's like stats, right? And none of it meant anything, right? And I was in a relationship at the time, and those were just boxes that were checked too. And like, so I had this moment, kind of like what you were saying, was like, I can't keep doing this, right? And I actually scared the shit out of myself, because I did go, like I had never been suicidal, but I thought to myself, like, is that gonna be me down the road? Because of the feeling was so heavy at that time, where that like, that was the thing for me that was like, okay, I got to do something here. So I wanna ask you guys, like, you know, I just even mentioned like my titles, my stuff, and we all have them, and you mentioned it before. Like, well, this is what I do, and one of the things that we were describing in this was like being able to be like, who am I, right? And that's what I love about this conversation. We all have such different backgrounds, different experiences, yet we're not really talking about those. And what I want to give you guys space to do is really answer the question of, who am I? Like, how would you describe yourself without talking about what you do for work?
I've started to make a distinction between decisions and choices. Whereas decisions are situations or challenges that occurred, and you mainly have to decide between this or that. Whereas choices, it's this infinitude of possibility that you get to choose from, and I feel like that is truly who you are when you're able to choose and use this power of choice. You know, you could be anything in you that you want, but you choose to be what you feel like you're most aligned or centered with. I mean, Brandon Crooms is Brandon Crooms because the choices that he makes. You know, he chooses beauty, he chooses hope, he chooses forgiveness, he chooses grace, he chooses gratitude, chooses joy, abundance, unconditional love. Like, that's what makes me me. And because I've chosen that, anything else outside of that is an intruder. So when I'm angry or when I'm sad, I'm like, who is this? Wait a second. What are you doing here? Nope, you got to go. You know, it's like, because choices to me, you know, that is what makes us who we are. Other than that, then anybody can be you, right? If it's not about your choices.
I have to touch on that real quick, because that goes back to putting your armor on, right? I think we talked about it. You can control what happens when you wake up and when you go to bed. Everything else throughout the day just kind of comes at you. But what you have done is put armor on to identify when an intruder is coming in, right? That's a beautiful thing. Yeah, man.
Yeah, it's like you can have, and this is life, right? We can have everything like that stripped, right? And some of us chose to strip it, right? But you're grounded in the essence, right? Like, well, these are them, right? So those things don't exist anymore. I still got me, because me actually can't be touched.
Yeah, it's like one of my mentors says, it's like someone can't rob you of your true values, right? Like someone can't rob you of joy and then be joy. Like they can't rob you of balance and then be balanced. Like for some reason it clicked for me. I'm like, yeah, like people can't rob you of those things and then they get them, you know, and if they act like they get them, it's a false sense, right? So, but like once you choose and not decide, once you choose these thoughts, these feelings, these emotions, these experiences that you want, it's like you can just live life because you know your intention is set in these choices. You know all these interactions are set in these choices, so you know that there's nothing too much to keep, you know, pondering about. It's like I chose my life. I'm not. No one's gonna help make me second guess, you know, my choices. You know.
That's awesome.
I'm curious to hear from the rest of you.
For me, it goes back to intention. You know, I think for so long I always knew I'd be successful at a young age. I remember telling my parents in like 5th grade or something, I was like, hey, don't worry about money. We're going to be fine. They're like, what are you talking about? I was like, I don't know, but I feel like I just got this vision. We're going to be fine.
Yeah, we're good.
You know? And so I've always had that. But what's scary is like when you see it fading away, when you see the choices you've made, even though they weren't bad choices, right? You were just going down a path that was getting you further from what you wanted. And, you know, I'm reminded when I was playing soccer, the dream was never really to play soccer. That wasn't the goal. The goal was to create a better life for my family, right? To make sure that we didn't have to worry about money. And so that was the vehicle I chose. It took a long time for me to remember who I was outside of that because my identity was wrapped up in that for so long that it was a struggle. Like it really was a struggle. And so when I did decide in 2017 that, hey, no one's coming to save you, you know? So what are you going to do? So I was like, okay, we're going to start reading, start writing things down, because I remember going into college and having upperclassmen say, Chris, your standards are too high, you need to lower them if you want to enjoy your time in college, right? And I was like, you know, innocent freshman, you're like, okay, cool. You go in, you're having a good time, and then you just continue. And I think a lot of people stay there, right? And it wasn't until 10 years later, almost, where I'm like, oh crap, I probably should raise my standards back up and now figure out who I want to be, right? And so I literally started writing down the same thing. I started writing down 9 things every single day since 2017. I still write them to this day. And I've added a lot of other things, but the 9 things have helped shape the person I want to become. Even if I never see this list, I'm aiming, right? So I don't set goals necessarily to hit the goals. I set them to keep me on a path and a trajectory, not only for myself, but for my family, the people coming behind me. So who I am, loving, faithful husband and father, that's the number one thing I wrote down because I saw that in my life. I had never been married. I had my child when I was 20 years old. That was not what I wanted growing up, right? And so I had to start reframing all these things, loving myself, going back to that. And then once I started writing this list, I slowly started feeling like tides turning, and I was giving myself more power to say, okay, what else am I, right? You know? And then when other people start to see changes, going back to protecting yourself, there's always negative thoughts coming in, right? I think that's one guarantee of life. We'll be born, we'll die, and something is going to attack us on the journey. But what are we doing to put our armor on and to protect the gates, you know, to protect the castle? And so but who you are is literally going to be determined based off of habits, being consistent and being intentional. I wake up, I do the same thing. I go to bed, I try to do the same thing. But even if I don't do the same thing at night, my habits throughout the day are the same. I'm going to do the same thing every single day regardless. Maybe the times are a little off, you know, but that has shaped who I am. And I don't want to give my future children, I don't want to give future generations an excuse or a reason to make excuses for why they can't be who they want to be based off of something that they saw me not doing. So I'm very, very intentional. I hold myself to a very high standard, which scares a lot of people. And it's made me remove myself from a lot of groups. And maybe some people have removed themselves from me, you know? But I think it's worth it when you're surrounded by a group of men like yourself. So.
And that even just when you said consistency, that just made me think, yes, not even just your choices, it's your commitment to those choices. Because I mean, it's true, maybe even anybody can make the choice, but who's going to commit to it? Who's going to be consistent, like you're saying?
Yeah.
And I think the big thing with that too is getting clear on where you're coming from with that, right? Going back to the conversation of fear or love, right? Am I doing it because I'm fearful and overcompensating, or am I doing it because I'm coming out of love, right? Because if I'm doing it out of fear and overcompensating, there's the ego, right? There's that side of me that's not actually able to meet the thing that needs to be met, that shadow, right? The dark. I'm not meeting it, so I'm going to overcompensate and commit and be consistent. And I think we see that, and I think there's such a fine line there, because I think too when we see things on social media and we see people talk about dedication and commitment and whatever, it ingrains in us as men of this perseverance, resiliency, fight. And I think those are great qualities. If it's at the cost of you, it's not going to work.
I do want to add on, just you sparked something.
Yeah.
When I started, it started from a place of hate and from a place of not only just like for myself, but for a lot of people that hurt me, you know?
Yep.
And you have this list. Everybody makes a list,
Yep.
right? And I think when you get to a place where you're able to forgive, then we're working and we're focused on heart health. And it took a long time for me to get to that place, because I could have continued to operate like that and possibly be successful.
Sure.
I wonder though if I didn't change what was inside here, I'm afraid of the man I would have become regardless of the success. You know, there's a lot of successful people in the world. I don't want to just be successful. I want to be a resource. I want people to truly know that when they were around me, their life was better. And they feel that, and that's the energy I give them. And so I didn't want to, I said it was Taylor Swift mentality. Like I was like, she's the best at it. She's so successful. You have to hear her and see her everywhere. I was like, that's how I would treat you. I would put a billboard in front of your house. You know what I mean? Like that's where it was coming from. Not a good place. Right.
Yeah.
So thank you. Through therapy, you know what I mean? You start realizing like, oh, this is not good. Okay.
Yep.
Let me reshape this.
That energy too that we talk about, that kind of that spiteful energy where we're just, all right, I'm gonna show you, you know, what you missed out on. And when you operate from that place, it is effective, but it is also taxing on the spirit, you know. And as soon as I was able to identify who are the people in my life that trigger me, what are some of the things in my own personal walk that trigger me, and whenever I get that emotional like response, that's an immediate like really flag for me to pay attention to how I can course correct, as opposed to just sitting in it. And had I not done that work through therapy to identify those things, I would have constantly been feeling those stings, you know, each time. And it is a constant journey, right?
Sure.
So like even now, I'm having to do that work when I do feel those feelings, going back to forgiveness, going back to just settling in knowing that, hey, it's okay to be in this, the uncomfortable, right? Like lean into it and see where it takes you. And we had a really good conversation after, me kind of opening up to you about everything that I had been going through. And you were very adamant about me sitting in the uncomfortable and sitting in the aspects of myself that I just did not like, right? And so I got to that place where I just got dark and deep, and I'm just like, dang. Coming out of it, I wrote like a letter to like my childlike self, right? Kind of going back to the first time I remember where I was hurt. And I took it back to like preschool, like all the way back to like when I was like 4 or 5, and like, some kid on the playground made me feel less than, right? I had never realized that was the inception for all of the other bitterness to be harbored in my life. So when other situations, as they would evolve, I was still that child, like that kid, right? And again, writing has been so crucial in my journey, just to be able to, because I love to talk and I love to express myself, but I also love to come from a place of like fluid thought. And so writing has just helped me navigate that in an objective way. Like I'm not looking at these things on a paper and saying like, oh, I shouldn't be saying this or I shouldn't be writing this, as dark as it gets, right? So that's really been therapeutic in me processing like how to lean into that resistance in those uncomfortable places.
Yeah, appreciate you sharing and opening up about that. That was similar for me. I think in my journey, it's so funny, and it makes so much sense looking back on it now too, because I made a commitment that I wanted to change. I wanted to make some adjustments, and I almost just took some of the things as a male and so egoically tried to almost like bully my way through it, right? It was like, I was like, let me meet the pieces that I want to meet and all the things I don't want to meet. If I pour in hard and I mentally just say the things to get myself through and I think positively, I'll get myself there. And what I started to do was actually have those things get louder. And it wasn't for me, right? Because in this conversation that we're having right now, right, when we're talking about showing up in that space, we're talking about showing up full. And in order to show up full, we have to be able to be with and have relationships with all of who we are, right? When we don't, there's that resentment, the frustration, all those different pieces, and that was a huge thing for me. I was like, nothing's changing, like all these things, and I was like, I'm doing it. Like, what's going on? And I realized like I hadn't actually met the dark. I knew it. I knew the dark. I had never allowed myself to go there because I thought I could bully and push my way through. And I had to meet it to see the light, right? I'm a huge Dermot Kennedy fan. He talks about getting the darkness to dance, right? Like I had to be there. That's where freedom came for me in my own experience, was building such deep relationships with the dark where I could just hold them now because they're so beautiful. And they actually still come with me everywhere I go. So very much like that, I had to go there.
True.
I don't think for me that I've, based off what you guys shared, I feel like I know those dark places, but I don't think that I still have fear that comes up on wanting to go in and sit with them, because there's a lot of things that were like, I know I need to go back into, but it's almost like I'm fearful of what might come up and what that might look like in relationships for my own self, like whatever that case is, because it can be daunting. So it's like, it's one thing definitely that just hearing it reminds me, it's like, it's okay to be in that and sit with them, because it's actually going to come out better on the other side. But, you're going to step into the flames there for a little bit, I think. So.
And I just want to make sure, like, it also just doesn't go away.
Yeah.
No.
Well, yeah, as much as I've tried to bully those things, there's always a situation that comes up, and it's always like, it's I'm over it, right? It's like, no. If you're thinking you're over it, then more than likely I really need to go back and work through it. And there's definitely some areas just through the evolution of whether it was from preschool or wherever it came from, that definitely can be addressed for me.
I want to ask you guys, I think so much of this conversation is so powerful and impactful, and I think part of it too is us as individuals at this table are in this work, and we're doing this work, and we're committed to this work, and at the same time we're all humans, right? And so I'm curious to know currently, right now, what's something that you find yourself struggling with that maybe people don't see?
Shoot, right? The way of the world.
Right.
I mean, like, man, I'm a creative. Saying most of my homies are creatives. Most of us are artists, builders, designers, and we're very ambitious, So it's like, man, society's wrong, Like, this is wrong. This industry's wrong. This is wrong. Everything becomes sort of wrong, and you want to change it. You want to improve. You want to make impact some way. And yeah, man, a lot of times you start to adopt the world's problems as if they're your own. And I think also a lot of that is just kind of built into this like save the world program that most strong-willed men adopt. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, I'm gonna fix everything. Like, I'm gonna save it. I'm gonna be, whatever it is. And so I think just constantly trying to figure out what to do with that. You know what I mean? Like, wanting not to become apathetic to the world's problems and be passive to the world's problems, but also not wanting to be overtaken by their problems. Which also led me to, it might be a little bit of a side note, but I do want to kind of talk about this really quick, which was like, man, I'm definitely was one of those people that was like, oh, mental health conversation, like, all right, because although I appreciate the context and the critical thinking around mental health, I do feel like there is a sort of undertone in I don't want to say the scary words, but like the demasculinity aspect of it a little bit. It does seem like societal wise, there's an undertone to that. And I'm just like, man, you see these problems we got going on? Like, do we got time to be talking about debating, mental health and all these things? But then when I hear your stories, I don't see like any, demasculinity. You know what I mean? Like, I really hear strength in your stories, and I really hear how y'all have met your challenges and your struggles with strength, and just. And it wasn't like strength that we all know, which is like you said, bully your way through. It's like, nah, I'm gonna go this way this time. It's just a simple, I'm gonna walk this way, and how strong that can be by just going in another direction. So again, just just inspired and empowered by your stories. So again, a little bit of a side note, but but back to the initial question. Yeah, man, I'm just really still configuring how to deal with that, man, that tension of like, I got my family's thing, but I gotta save the world. Like, there's so much stuff going on. I can change it. I feel like I got the mindset and the ability to do so. Still figuring it out,
Yeah, it's a beautiful dance.
Yeah, right.
It's very similar. I think the biggest thing for me right now, just in terms of struggling, would be struggling to not, I would say, project on others and like tell others how they need to live, but also seeing society's problems and seeing these statistics of men's mental health, of how detrimental it is in terms of suicide or whatever the case is, seeing people struggle, and me struggling to not overstep my boundaries, but also at the same time want to put myself out there and be vulnerable enough to want to share them, because I struggle to find that fine line of where is too much and where is not enough. but then I also see these problems like we see out in the world, or what's going on, and the violence and so many different things that, based off what I know, is it's probably what however things happen to them growing up, just like same as some of the things, same things that might have happened to me. So it's like I struggle to want to help some people that I know a lot, but them might not being receptive, and me just like kind of like getting scared and pulled away. So it's like that's a struggle because I'm torn between the two. Like I want to help them, but at the same time I don't want to overstep my boundaries. So it's like I just play it safe, and then where does that get me? So it's a really like it's almost this constant conundrum in my mind that can really spend a lot of energy that's probably not needing to be spent.
One of my favorite quotes that I've really just kind of been moving in this last half of the year is that empathy is in direct correlation to proximity, right? So like being empathetic or connecting with people, problems, whatever, is in correlation to how approximate you are to the issues. As much as we see stuff on the news or social media that will broadcast all of the worst things happening in our society, when you're not approximate to those deeper rooted issues, it is hard to be empathetic and to really like feel and connect with the issue at hand. And so for me, that's something I'm really trying to work on, right? Like as I'm working on myself, like how am I being more approximate to core issues that we're dealing with? Specifically with Charlotte, I feel like the homelessness issue within Charlotte has been super pressing. And we had an opportunity to do a film project around Roof Above and the projects that they're doing with helping men's shelters and things like that. And so we sat down with some guys that, having their stories told in a very impactful way where they were just upfront about their journey from coming, off the streets to getting to permanent housing, right? And all of the little intricacies and trials they had to go through to get to that point, right? On top of dealing with things like addiction and just different things like that. And me not being in that environment and being approximate to it all the time, when you sit down with someone that's just been there, I'm like, oh, wow, this is crazy, And so that's really what I'm trying to work on, is just being more approximate to the issues without, because I'm a feeler, I'm a deep feeler. So if it's like energy that I'm feeling and I just want to fix and help, a lot of times that can be taxing. So I'm trying to find that balance. And then the main thing I'm really trying to work on right now is another quote: be your biggest critic, not your worst enemy. And that's something that I'm trying to live by. As an artist, as a creative, I'm always finding ways. Oh, we did this, great. How can it be better? Like, how can we, continue to push the envelope forward, and like always looking at it, analyzing the issues, as opposed to like being present and like what was brought together was beautiful, and let's celebrate that for the time and continue to move forward. So as I'm in my journey, it's again being approximate, but also continuing to not be my worst enemy in that process. So yeah, it's a journey. I'm still figuring it out. But yeah.
Empath.
Huge empath, man. Big feeler.
I got you. I would say my biggest struggle is doing the work, being consistent with doing the work, and not seeing the results. Because we have our own timeline of how things should look, and so it's easy to get discouraged. It's easy to want to quit. But for example, it's much easier for me to go in the gym, throw some weights on and be like, all right, I checked off this box today. I'm getting stronger in this area. My body looks good in this area. I want my arms to be bigger. I can do that, and people can see that, right? People can't see when you're reading and you're pouring in and you're working on that mental muscle, right? And so I think for me, I have to remind myself when I am doing the work that this is something that you're doing for life, right? You may not see results for 10, 20, you don't know, right? Even with business, you don't know when the results will come, but you have to continue to just follow the path and make sure and adjust, right? That is the hardest thing, I think, as a creative, as a business owner, as a human being, to just keep going into the unknown. You know.
Mine's similar. I have two, but one of mine is continuing to trust. Right, coming out of a 9-to-5, coming out of where things kind of are set up, and you're like, oh, cool, I can actually see where the end result is, or I know, right, where that end result goes, or I know what that next step is because it's in the box. And stepping outside the box is really challenging because you have to trust the unknown. You have to trust what you don't see. And so it's like the things that I'm doing daily, trusting that it works, that it plays out. And like when I even say that, even sitting in this moment, reflecting, going back to what we were saying, it's not actually about do the fruits show up. It's am I committed to who I say I want to be, right? And if I'm committed to who I say I want to be, it's going to take care of itself, right? And that's the hardest thing though, right? Those moments where we create the timeline and we're like, oh man, this conversation and this is going to happen and that's going to happen. And you're like, oh shit. That didn't happen. And you're like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
It's just trusting that. So that's one of them for me. I think the other thing, and I've really embodied this, is continuing to be the highest form of the behavior that I seek in others.
Say that again. Say continuing.
Continuing to be the highest form of the behavior that I seek in others. So I have to represent the behavior.
Powerful.
I have to represent what that is. And so for me, right, sitting here with you guys, having a vulnerable conversation, sharing what's on our hearts and in our minds and talking about these things, it's like, well, if I'm committed to this, I got to step into this, right? And I think and I'm sharing it as a struggle because it's hard.
Yes.
It's hard sometimes to wake up and be like, all right, let's go again, right? It gets lighter because of the relationships I start to have with these things. But as humans, we still continue to have more experiences, and so I'm going to have more stuff, right? And so it's just being. I think the struggle is just the commitment to showing up as that behavior that I seek in other men and people. So
It's powerful.
Yeah, standards. It's having standards with grace. Standards with grace is what is speaking to me, because each of us have a standard for ourselves. You know, we don't tolerate things we don't tolerate. You know what I'm saying? And so I think it's easier to possibly have grace for ourselves if we like fall off course and then get back on track. But then I would just hold people to a same standard, but I would never give them grace. You know what I'm saying? And so I had to adopt that phrase, grace with standards. Like, Chris, you have this standard, cool, that's for you, and you hold people around you accountable to that standard as well, but understand they're not you. And you have to love them regardless.
I wanna wrap with one final question for each of us. You know, we're talking a lot about our own personal journeys, but then how it translates to the world, and you know, whether it's children, partners, careers, right? We have to integrate and we have to show up, and we represent men. And so, what do you guys feel like is the hardest thing about being a man?
We have to sit with that. That's layered, man. It's a lot.
TBD. To be determined.
I'd be curious to know, like, in that question, right? And you're right, it's layered. When you think about that, though, what's something that kind of pops up first. I think, and I'll just speak for me, I think one of the hardest things about being a man is people think we need to have it all together. We need to have the security. We need to be there to take care of other people. We need to know what the next step is. We need to have it all figured out. And we can't actually let our humanness show. To be like, yo, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
Because it's like, but you're supposed to. So I think that's one of the hardest things for us as men. Because for me, and I'm speaking from my experience and what when it's, you have to have it all together, the moment we don't seek help. Because we're acting like we have it all together. And so we just isolate ourselves.
It's like an autopilot.
Yeah, it's like, well, what do I need to do to make sure this performance is going on so people think I have it all together when I have no fucking clue.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that's one of the hardest things, at least, you know, for me in my experience and just what I see in society as being a man is like not being able to peel the layer and be like, there's a lot going on here.
Society's narrative of what a man is has changed. And I believe each of us are a part of that change. You know, if we look at our grandparents when they grew up, you know, like, it was that World War, my granddad was Vietnam era. So thinking back to that time, like, a man was very much one way, right? It was, hey, you're a provider, you don't show your emotions, true strength is in providing for your family and pretty much not asking for help, going back to what you said. And I think society the narrative has changed among people that are growing, but I don't think the narrative has changed in society as a whole.
I want to ask, for you guys as fathers, how has that narrative of manhood changed for y'all?
Good question.
Well, I would actually challenge the initial question in a sense, because maybe it could be more of a cycle. Maybe in the beginning it's like, yeah, okay, you that narrative of you got to have it all together, and then hopefully you start to comprehend that you don't have to, and you can get help and things.
Sure.
But then maybe another part of that cycle is then you're like, well, actually maybe I think I want to have it all together. And not so much in the sense of like, again, society's narrative of what having it all together is, but it's like, like when I don't ever want my wife or my daughter to see that, life is a struggle. Like, I don't want to hold my head over or be stressed about anything that my daughter or my wife has to lay eyes on that. Like, that to me is just something I choose for it not to be an experience in our life. Like, I'm not going to let life get that hard or that much of a struggle for me. I refuse it. So, I do appreciate, the sort of, let's say, dominant masculine properties that I have that provides a certain perspective to look at some of these narratives in a way that's like, like, no, I'm not. If I wanted to cry, I could cry. Cool, that's out the way. But I choose not to, because I don't want them to think that it's this hard for me to figure this thing out. Life is not, for me, I've chosen life is not that going to be a hard game. It's not going to be a struggle for us anymore. It's done. So, yeah, I think it's important, like you said, just kind of finding that balance between like, okay, society's going to have its narratives. I don't have to adopt those narratives and stigmas. I truly just need to I can even redefine those narratives and stigmas to fit inside the life that I choose. So, that's the only thing when we have these mental health conversations, that it's like really refining it and designing it for your life. Because yes, we all need help, we all need community, we all need a brotherhood, a sisterhood, things of that nature, right? We all, health is a real thing. I would just add that, again, just don't allow society to have you adopting narratives that might not fit your
Yeah.
own, you know?
Yeah. And define it in a way that serves you, knowing that there's fluidity in that
Right.
as well. Like you said, in one season it might look and be and show up one way, and through your evolution can be something different, and that's okay, right? Like you're allowed to change your definitions of things, right?
Yeah, we're constantly evolving.
Yeah.
That is the beauty of life. We get to choose. We are the only species that has free will. Think about that.
It's true.
Like, that's crazy of all the
These
things.
dolphins,
Well,
you
yeah.
talking so they're like,
right. They on to something.
But it's crazy to think how we have the opportunity to literally create what we want. Our minds are that powerful to choose what path, to choose what type of father we want to be, what type of business owner, creator, business owner, and facilitate, all of the things we choose, what that looks like. Going back to your question, my situation as a father is a little different than Brandon's because I'm not in my child's life. And so I had to learn how to be my best self regardless of that. And that's a very painful place to be when you know that you're doing the work, when you know that you're not a bad person, you haven't done anything wrong, but there are things outside of your control where it's just, I could choose to sit in that and wallow and woe is me and it's because of this person or that. No, I take full responsibility for the decisions that I make. And in that, I've accepted that I'm going to be the best version of myself because I know what that looks like. I know when my time comes, I will meet who I was supposed to be. This is how I see it. When I pass, I'll meet the person that I was meant to be, and I don't want him to look unfamiliar. I want him to be like, damn bro, like I saw the work you were putting in, and honestly, like you scared me, you know what I'm saying? Like you really pushed the envelope and you did things we weren't expecting, right? All of that, with that said, no one can take any of the work that I've done here on earth away. So in my mind, the work that I'm doing now is for me, one, it's for my family, two, and it's to build the kingdom, three. And so build it, they will come, right? Like my child will see everything that we've done, whether he wants to be a part of it later when he's, when we are able to sit down and have a conversation. He's 13, so, and I just, that's one of the things, it's different. I've done a lot of work in that area. Is you pray for restoration, but you decide who you want to be. I've decided. I don't care what other people's narrative is.
Powerful.
I do have one last thing. I want us to finish this sentence. Men can blank.
Men can be. Like simply just be, right? Like we're so used to attaching a man's narrative to action, to, our roles or our titles or whatever that is. And I'm learning just the value of sitting with that, of just being fully present where I'm at. I don't have to be this person or that person. I'm here, right? yeah, like giving us that permission. We don't need that permission, right? Just be. And then in that, I feel like so much value can come out of us naturally from knowing that we can just be. We're not trying to overcompensate.
Everyone else is just gonna have a variation of that.
B number 2, B number 3, B number 4, B number 5.
I definitely thought you were, because my mind went there, but then it was be vulnerable for me.
Right.
You know, that was my biggest struggle, and that's something I've had to, again, that goes back to just loving yourself, right?
Yeah.
Be vulnerable with yourself first, and love yourself enough to show that to the world.
Yes, love it.
Awesome.
What are we gonna do with that, man? Oh man.
We got the right round table.
Right? All right. Men can be vulnerable. I love that. Yeah, man. I think I'm gonna continue your trend. I mean, men can be anything. I'm gonna add the B to it, but like, yeah, again, like, you can be expressive. You can, you know, whatever you're aligned to express, you can do that. You know. But also, if you want to stick to traditional men roles too, you could do that too. You know what I mean? You could be the alpha male if that's what you want to be. You know, or you can be, you know, you can define your own, you know, masculinity for yourself. Sure. You know, you can live in this world. There's no rules. You know what I mean? So, I'm excited I'm very hopeful for this generation and this new generation of men too. You know, like more conversations like this.
Sure.
You know, being able to sit in that discomfort, sit in those fears, and cultivate something from that that's going to be impactful and that's going to serve the world. I'm hopeful for us, you know.
Mine was men can feel joy. You don't have to always be in that taking action. Like, it's okay to be happy and joyful even when maybe we don't feel like everything's going our way, or we're not to this, you know, high peak where we feel we need to be. Like, it's okay to feel joy in that moment. Like, you're still living life and you're still like, you're here. And I think that's very easy to forget about and be taken for granted, that I know personally I struggle with all the time. I get so caught up in the, what am I going to do next, and who do I need to be? Am I there yet? You know, how do I need to help? No, I just enjoy and be joyful in that, and that can actually express so much energy that all that stuff will come.
And letting go, like the need to control. I think that's, as men, we want to be in control of the narrative and moving. So when that feels like it's chaotic, the joy can be stripped. So
you don't even remember what joy is.
Exactly. It's powerful.
I would say men can heal. Men can go on the journey of building those relationships, of cultivating self-love, of becoming intimate with themselves, to open up intimacy with other people. And I think through healing, we as men can unite. We don't then see each other as this competition where how do I win and he lose? How do we come to the table and look at each other and say, hey, you're my brother. I want to see you win. I want to see you win. I want to see you win. And I want to see you win because I'm whole and I'm healed. So that's what it was for me. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for taking the time. Again, this is a chip, right? This is a chip at the conversation. This is a chip at coming together. This is a chip at starting to put conversations out there so men can start seeing the types of dialogues and things that exist. And hopefully you walked away feeling more connected with each of us, and hopefully you saw bits and pieces of your own journey in all of our shares. And that's what it's about. It's about, as men, knowing that we're not alone, right? And we see each other. And so thank you again. I'm extremely grateful for all of you.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
All right.
Awesome.